Hey guys, it's Haven, and I'm going to be talking about One Piece Chapter 1064, Egghead's Research Strata. Again, a lot of stuff happened in this chapter. I have a feeling that's just going to be how it is for a while, where we're seeing a lot of information and a lot of characters. So let's talk about it. So the cover story, of course, comes first, and this one is titled Kuzan and Augur of the Blackbeard Pirates. So, of course, we knew the last couple of weeks when we've seen the frozen over Chocolate Town and then Pudding getting kidnapped, we can make the assumption that it's probably Kuzan, since we knew that he had been said to have aligned with the Blackbeard Pirates, or at least become a member or something like that. And of course, we get the confirmation now, and he is confirmed to have the second person there was Van Augur, which makes sense since we know that Van Augur has the warp fruit, so it probably made it a lot easier for them to go in and come back out. Although we don't know the extent of the warp fruit's powers quite yet, how far away they can travel, if they can immediately warp back, if it has to be within like a sight line. It's not really clear yet, but I'm sure we'll get a little bit more context for that soon. And then Pudding is of course here as well. So we have the confirmation that the two figures that we had seen earlier, which Oda had kind of led us to believe were Germa, are in fact the Blackbeard Pirates. And I'm not sure if this is the confirmation that Kuzan is the 10th captain, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that he is at this point. Moving on from the cover story, we have Teach versus Law, and I think the matchup of Whitebeard's fruit that Blackbeard has and then Law's fruit actually match up kind of well in a fight. I don't know how the darkness power is going to work, but I guess we'll see. So Law sends Shachi and Penguin away to provide cover in the sea, and he is kind of 1v1ing Blackbeard right now after he slices Stronger in half using the amputate technique, and he also is using our room. I don't know if he's ever used this before, and I just maybe didn't notice, but it's definitely different than room. I'm not sure what the extent is. It might be like part of the awakened Devil Root powers, and Teach even comments like, nobody told me his power could do this, is he using an awakened technique? So I'm assuming that the amputate has to do with the fact that it's the R room, but I guess we'll find out more as this fight continues. Now, I think perhaps the most surprising and unexpected part of this chapter was how useful Shachi and Penguin were. I always kind of was under the impression that they were useless because Oda never really gave them much screen time, but it's kind of cool to see them actually doing something for once. So we have Shachi and Penguin doing this like underwater combat stuff where they're like swallowing a bunch of water and then spitting it out like almost like fishmen. So it kind of makes me wonder, are they actually fishmen and we just never knew the whole time? Because that would make sense, seeing how their pirate ship is primarily underwater. Like, having the Polar Tang be an underwater vessel without having any fishmen might not be great. So, I don't know. I think that they probably are fishmen, or maybe they're part fishmen, so that they don't really have the distinct features, but they still have the ability to, like, breathe underwater and whatnot. And then we have John Bart acting as a literal human shield for Law. So I guess maybe his armament hockey is just really good. And that's probably how he blocks Van Augur's bullet. Because we know that Van Augur is like one of the best shots in the whole One Piece world, right? We have like Yasop, we have Van Augur, we have Usopp, and then I want to say Ben Beckman, but I don't know if he's ranged. But we have them, actually holding their own, which is pretty cool considering they've kind of not done much so far since we've met them. The only concern that I'm having right now with this fight, because like things are going really well, and I know that it's not gonna last, because we know that Kuzan is a confirmed member of the Blackbeard Pirates at this point. He is most likely on the ship, right? He is most likely on the ship, and if he comes out, he can freeze the water and take out Law's crew, right? And then Law is kind of fucked. So that's kind of my concern right now, but I guess we'll see. I'm just a little worried for Law right now. And now we kind of turn back to Law and Blackbeard fighting, and he uses the Shock Willy or Shock Willa. I'm not really sure how you're supposed to say it, honestly. And he just, stabs Blackbeard right through his gut. And Van Augur is like, well, this is what happens when you go in half cocked, not like, isn't. And then he warps him away. And he's like, do we want to return to the ship, Teach? And then Teach is like, don't be an idiot, we finish what we start. Which I think is hysterical for him to say that, because that's just so not true. The amount of times where Teach has bailed on something, like, he bailed at Marineford when he saw Shanks and all of the other people. He was like, yeah, I'm not fucking with them. When we just saw him, like, a couple weeks ago in the story, right, he got scared of Rayleigh when he was about to kill Hancock, and he chickened out and left, right? So we know Blackbeard does not always finish what he starts, so Teach is full of shit. And Law asks him, do all your officers have devil fruit powers? And he just laughs, and he's like, must be a pretty raw deal having so many anchors around. And Teach pretty much says that the power outweighs the risk, and that it's worth it. And then we pan and see Shachi and Penguin are fighting underwater, shooting Blackbeard's ship, trying to sink it to knock out his whole pirate crew. And then we see Pudding. We finally get to see Pudding actively and not just in the cover story. So the scene with Pudding is some random people on Blackbeard's ship, being like, oh, we're taking a pounding, but it's fine, like, the Commodore's so strong. And Pudding is, like, got, like, bruises, some band-aids on her, but she's, like, completely calm and is, like, smirking, and she's like, Mama's gonna make you eat those words if she's still alive. And so that's, again, we don't know if Big Mom and Kaido are actually alive, so we don't really get much from that, just that this is the first time where the cover story has immediately tied into the chapter, right? We've had the last couple have been really close, they've been relevant, but this one is like a direct tie-in, which is really cool, and I wonder if we're gonna get any more cover stories at this point, like maybe one or two at this point, because he doesn't do them that often, right? But I think it's interesting, though, that she is just kind of so calm. It makes me kind of wonder, has Pudding awakened the voice of all things? Does she know if Big Mom's alive? Guess we'll find out soon enough, right? We pan to a really short scene, which is just Sakazuki, and he's just being very frustrated that he can't really do anything now that he is Fleet Admiral. He can't exactly go off storming around doing whatever the fuck he pleases, and he's frustrated that, Teach and Law are going at it and he can't really do anything about the situation right now. And he says that this is Winter Island. That's the name of the island that they're on. I don't know that we had that information before, but Winter Island is the name of the island that Law and Teach are on. So we pan again to Luffy's group for the first time this chapter, and again, Oda is using stuff that were pieces in the SBS directly in the chapter, so we see, like, Old Man Luffy, a glimpse at a possible future. And then, of course, Bonnie used her devil fruit power, which we still don't really know too much about it. We know some of the things it can do, but we don't know the extent. We don't know if it's awakened. We don't know exactly what it is, right? And we see, like, an old man Chopper Reindeer, a young Bonnie, Old Man Luffy, and then, like, a little kid Jinbei, which is kind of adorable. I don't know, but, like, little kid Jinbei is just so freaking cute. Like, I can't. So this scene actually gives us a little more context for Kuma and Bonnie. So Luffy pretty much is saying that, like, I know that it looks like your dad, but, like, Bonnie, we have to take him out. And Chopper's like, Luffy, come on, like, you know that this is hard for Bonnie, like, chill. Jinbei pretty much has the same sentiment of, like, you know, it's tough for her because, like, that's her dad, and, like, this is just really confusing and messy. But then Jinbei kind of goes off on a little tangent about Kuma, giving us some more context. And he's like, nothing personal, Bonnie, but from what I've heard, Kuma isn't exactly the best person. Jinbei says that he was tyrannical as the king of Sorbet Kingdom, and that before the people deposed him, and then he was forced to become a pirate. And Bonnie's just kind of like looking a little like sad, and Jinbei continues saying like he was eventually caught by the Navy, and he had ties to the Revolutionary Army, so they gave him a life sentence, but Vegapunk took an interest into him due to his physical prowess, this is important, right? We're going to find that out soon enough. So he was offered the opportunity to roam the seas again as the warlord, I almost said landlord, and the condition was that he had to become a specimen for body modification and cloning. And Jinbei's like, does that pretty much cover it? I think is really funny as Jinbei is talking, we see Bonnie like digging through the pile of like rejected Vegapunk ideas and gadgets, and she finds like essentially a lightsaber and is like grabbing the lightsaber, getting ready to like fucking cut Jinbei down, which is kind of hysterical. And she's like, I get why he'd choose to be a warlord dog and help them make the clones and whatnot, but like, who would willingly and knowingly agree to become a mindless cyborg who loses all of their self, right? Like, anyone would be able to tell that that's like fucking horrendous. And Jinbei's like, you know, I wonder which one of Tyrant Kuma's crimes earned him his life sentence. And Bonnie starts to get really angry and isn't just like twiddling around with the lightsaber. She like full on swings it. She's like yelling. She's like, Daddy was not a stinking tyrant. Like, he hated the government. He never would have submitted to them. They must have forced him to do this and accept this somehow. Like, this doesn't make sense. And then while this is happening, Luffy's like, a beam saber? And that's when like we find out that it's Vegapunk's scrapyard pretty much. And Bonnie says like he may call himself a scientist, but to me he's just a murderer. And she says that Dad always used to say he was part of a very special race. But so what? Him being different doesn't justify forcing him to be a lab rat. And it sure as hell doesn't justify killing him. And then Chopper's like, a special race? And let's talk about that. So first off, let's go back and think about that conversation between Big Mom and King. Big Mom had said that she, on her island and in her territory, her family, whatnot, she said that she has every single race present except for 3. Now, one of them, I think it's pretty safe to assume, was giants, because that's a touchy subject for Big Mom. And then the second one, which was King's race, was later revealed to be Lunarian, right? And then there's this third race, and I think that Kuma might be the third race that Big Mom was talking about. And let's talk about why, right? Now, I could be way off base here with this assumption, but if you look at Kuma and Teach side by side, there are a lot of physical similarities. One is they both have darker skin. I don't know how dark it is in comparison to the Lunarians, but it's definitely darker than most of the characters that we see, and it's not like a distinct pigment like the fishmen and the mermaids are, where they have very particular pigmentation depending on, you know, what fish they're mixed with, their lineage, all of that. So that's a whole separate thing, right? But Teach and Kuma both have this darker pigmented skin, so that's one thing. 2, if you look at their hair, they both have like jet black hair, and it's very coily and tight and dark, right? They have that curly dark hair. And if you also look at them side by side, their body shapes are very similar. So if you look at the actual structure of their torsos are very, very broad and significantly larger than the rest of their body in proportion. They have smaller legs that seem to be more of regular humans, and both Teach and Kuma have been talked about their physical prowess, their bodies, like having very strong bodies. The fact that Teach can hold 2 devil fruits, I think, is a pretty good indicator as well for this. And that kind of makes me wonder, like, does Kuma have multiple devil fruits that we're not aware of? Can Blackbeard get more? Is Blackbeard planning on getting a 3rd devil fruit? Is he aware of what he is? So I think that they're the same race, or at least have some lineage of the same race, if not both from that exact, race that hasn't really been talked about. And we don't know what this race is. We don't know what the information surrounding it is. We don't really know much about it. And I think we can also assume, just based on how Bonnie looks, she doesn't really have any of the same attributes as Kuma. I would assume that she's an adopted daughter. Not that that makes her any less, her daughter, like his daughter, but I would assume that it's a situation like with Nami and her family, where it's like an adopted parent, but it's, their parent, but they don't have the same DNA, because Bonnie doesn't look anything like him, and if he is this separate race, wouldn't she say, we are from this race. We are a special race, not just my dad is a special race. You know what I mean? I think that distinction is going to be important, but I guess we'll see. So the next couple of panels or pages are Franky's group, and it's just them, like, going through the air, going to Egghead Island, like the actual, base of it, and it's just kind of them, like, fanboying and girling over, I guess more fanboying, I don't think Nami and Robin actually care that much, over the different, like, specs on the robot and whatnot, and just the lab in general. And they're talking about, like, the stratum and the clouds, and how this is, like, the Sky Island, and it's kind of, like, a cute moment for Franky, because he's like, wow, this is my first time, like, I never, like, got to go to the Sky Island, because I hadn't been part of the group yet, and it's just kind of cute, because it's like, oh, like, this new experience for him. And there's a lot of, like, sci-fi stuff in the next couple of pages, and so they're going to the main lab, and the rest of the Straw Hats get decked out in their own outfits, just like Luffy, Chopper, and Jinbei did. They all get different sci-fi outfits. So Nami's outfit looks a lot like Bonnie's. Robin's is a little more sexy. Usopp's is like a jumpsuit thing. Franky's, it's kind of hard to tell what Franky's is because Usopp's standing in front of him, but it kind of looks like Luffy's outfit as well. And then Sanji is the one in the group that gets the Hawaiian shirt like Jinbei did. And they're all like, wow, like, everybody looks good. And then Sanji's just kind of like, oh, okay, I guess I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt. And then we get another giant reveal right after this. So the last couple of panels are, I think, super important, because this is giving us a lot more information about the near future. And we see Punk 1, we know it's 1 because it has the 1 on its head, and they don't have their face revealed, they're just like in a mask or a helmet thing, and they're on either transponder snail or some kind of, telecommunicative device, and he's saying, like, the problem with being a genius is that you can see your own future coming too. And the person on the other line of the phone, what are you talking about, Vegapunk? And then he says, I think I'll be dead soon. And the person on the other side says, don't kid about something like that. And then he says, I just wanted you to know about this, Dragon. So this is the confirmation of something that a lot of people have been suspecting for quite some time now, which is that Dr. Vegapunk has ties to the Revolutionary Army. And I think this makes sense, and I think that this gives us clarity around why Kuma was being able to be programmed to watch the Straw Hat ship back at Sabaody Archipelago, pre and post time skip, right? If Vegapunk was entirely in the government's pocket and actually didn't give a shit about anything besides what the government told him to do, I don't think that he would have been willing to do that. And the fact that that was something that was very risky, knowing that he would be jeopardizing himself potentially and raising flags about his own intentions to the government and to the Gorosei and whatnot, I think he was aware of that. And I think he's been aware that he is going to be hunted down for a while because he was working on the Lunarian pacifistas, and those were going to replace the warlords, and once those were set, I think the intention was always to whack him, because not only was what he did at Sabaody Archipelago really suspicious, he also knows too much, right? He is the only person that we know of that isn't like the Gorosei or Eam, because I would assume they're aware of that stuff as well, but he's the only character that we're aware of that understands devil fruits, that understands the nature of devil fruits, how they function, and he's aware of the Lunarians, and probably the other races as well, because Kuma being experimented on has to do with the fact that he's the special race, right? It has to do with the fact that he has special DNA, otherwise it wouldn't have mattered so much. So he has a lot of information, and he probably knows information about the 100-year void, and, you know, the information surrounding that, and the nature of some of the stuff that happened there, just because he is aware of these different races, and the physical abilities of all these different things. So, now that we know that Dragon is connected, and the revolutionaries are connected to Vegapunk, I think we're about to get some really, really big information dumps, which I'm very excited for, because I just want to know all of the stuff about the devil fruits and how they work, because there's been so many little information drops about how they function, how there's like devils inside of them, how they have a will of their own, why can't people swim with them, how did they even begin to exist, like all of that stuff. I think we're going to get answers to it very soon. So that's about it for now. The other chapter will be coming out pretty soon. Thank you for tuning in if you did. If you have anything that you want to comment on or anything that you thought of, feel free to comment. But yeah, that's it. Bye.